bow is pretty much complete. We've got a string on it. This isn't a bowstring, it's a piece of parachute cord. The bowstring that I ordered hasn't come yet, so unfortunately we're stuck with this. There's probably someone out there who's going to say, Mr. Lehman, you're not supposed to use a parachute cord for a bow, you have to use bowstring. I get it, I'll put one on when I get a chance. Anyway, we've got a piece of parachute cord on here, and when we pull the bow back, as far as I can tell, it seems to work. So, pretty amazing actually. Ipe and bamboo, that's all it takes. The draw weight on our bow ended up being a lot less than we wanted it to be, but it'll still work. It still pulls back a little over 20 pounds. So, it'll work. I think it'll shoot an arrow. So today our step is going to be to take our handle and we're going to shape out our handle so it feels really good in the hand. You can see it's still really square here. So we'll probably use a combination of the sanders, and then we'll also probably do some rasp work and some hand sanding. And then after that, we'll make some arrows.
The first step was to use the rasp, a useful hand tool, to create the arrow shelf. You don't want the place where the arrow is going to sit to be perfectly flat. You want to make it round, and the rasp was perfect for this. So I used the rasp all along the arrow shape, the shelf, to make it nice and round so it curved away from the grip. I finished it out with the orbital sander, which became a very useful tool for this part of the build. Then I went over to the oscillating spindle sander, which also became a key tool for this part because we needed a rounded concave grip. The oscillating spindle sander is perfect for making concave curves, so we used it all along the fades and the grip. Then I used a spoke shave, a very cool hand tool, to make the rounded edges nice and smooth, and finished it off with our orbital sander. You can see I have a nice thick foam pad on the orbital sander, so it'll bend to the contours of the handle. This was really useful at getting all around the convex and concave surfaces. I then used this pad to finish out the bow, sanding everything by hand. After this, the last step was to take some teak oil and put teak oil on the bow. This gives it a nice protective finish. After that, I was pretty much done.
All right, friends, so our bow is done, and now we need to make some arrows. We're going to make some arrows out of wood. We're not going to go onto Amazon and just buy some aluminum arrows. Why would we want aluminum arrows for a beautiful wood bow that we just made? So what I did is I got some nice dowels here, and we are going to take these dowels, we're going to straighten them out, and then we're going to put these sharp tips on the end, and we're going to put the nocks on the other end. These hold the string, and then we'll actually add some feathers to them. And when we're done, hopefully these will fly pretty straight. So the first thing we want to do is take these wooden dowels and we want to straighten them out. These are wood, so they're naturally just kind of curved. We're going to do the best we can to straighten them out. After we straighten them out, we're going to taper the ends of our dowels so that our nocks and our points fit on. And then we are going to glue some feathers onto these arrows. I think. I've never done this before. Let's see if this works.
You can see when we put the arrows on a flat surface that they weren't perfectly straight. So to straighten them, I put them on the surface, and then I used what's called a burnishing tool to push down hard on the grain of wood and flatten them out. Then I made a special jig to taper the ends of the dowels. By running the ends through the belt sander in the jig, I could taper them, and then the points fit on the arrow, as well as the nocks.
All right, we've got our shafts all tapered and they're all straight. And so now we're going to take our points and we are going to glue our points on, and we are going to glue our nocks on. Now you're supposed to use hot glue for your points so you can take the point on and off by heating it up. I don't have any hot glue. I'm going to be a rebel and I'm just going to use 5-minute epoxy, which means they're probably going to be permanently attached. Oh well. And I'm also just going to epoxy my nocks onto the end too. So let's do that. Mix up some epoxy and glue them on.
We saw this epoxy earlier when we glued the tips onto our bow. Basically, you just take the two parts, lay down equal amounts, and then stir them up, which is what I'm doing right here. After doing this, I took the tapered ends of the dowel, put them in the epoxy, and just glued the tips on. Once the tips and the nocks were on, then I made a special jig so I could mark out where the feathers or the fletching would go on the arrow. You can buy a jig for this, but I just made one. I then simply added super glue to the feathers and glued the feathers onto the arrow, as you can see here. This was a little tricky to keep them in place, but I managed to make it work. When it was done, we had 3 feathers glued on to the arrow shaft. One color goes on the outside. After doing this, I then trimmed the feathers to make them a little bit narrower. And that pretty much took care of it.
Well, folks, we succeeded in making a bow and some arrows. I can pretty much guarantee this is the only time you're going to watch your teacher make a bow and arrow at school. And we did it. We've got a nice bamboo backed Ippei bow, and we have some nice arrows. So when we come back next time, I think we ought to shoot it.